Hello and welcome to Jynx Vision. I am Jynx the Lynx, and today's movie review is Kong, Skull Island. Yeah, the first Kong movie in 12 years. First one since Peter Jackson's King Kong back in '05. Now we have Kong, Skull Island, which is going to be part of the new Godzilla Monsterverse. Yeah, that's what they're calling it, the Monsterverse. So, Kong, Skull Island. I'm probably going to get into spoilers. I have a habit of doing that. You know, if you see my videos, you know I have a habit of doing that. But I'm going to give my initial thoughts first before I get deep into spoilers. A lot of fun. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a great bunch of fun. You know, a lot of action, a lot of fighting monsters, and, you know, it's got a cool Lost World theme. And Kong's a really cool character. And it's just a lot of fun, this movie. I really enjoyed it. Now, probably, where I delve into the story and give away little details and spoilers and things like that. So, alright, here we go. You've been warned. The movie begins with a brief prologue set in 1944 during World War II, somewhere in the South Pacific. Japanese fighter pilot and American fighter pilot crash land on an island, and they start to fight each other, and they're going to shoot and kill each other, but they're interrupted by Kong. This gigantic hand that just goes, wah, wah. And cut to 1973, the end of the Vietnam War, or at least the U.S. involvement, major U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. So the movie is a period piece, actually, a prequel to Godzilla 2014. So it's really steeped in the time period, the late 60s, early 70s, with the music and the computers. You know, they have shots of reel-to-reel spinny things, and those telephones, you know, back in the day, with the rotary dials. I think we see some of those. That's kind of cool. The fact that we see the culture, you know, see the just the technology. There's even a little Nixon bobblehead in the movie. That's kind of funny. Yeah, it's just 1973. Just to remind you that this is 1973, and the music is, of course, late 60s, early 70s, kind of rock music, you know, from that era. And we hear quite a few songs from that time period. So the movie concerns a scientific expedition that's sent to this island by John Goodman. You know, he wants to prove that there's still that there's monsters out there in the world, and wouldn't you know, he's proven right. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So it's escorted by military helicopter pilots. You know, a Samuel L. Jackson and a British SAS guy. And it's got a combat photographer, you know, an anti-war Vietnam photographer, and it's got a couple of different scientists, and, you know, John Goodman's friend, and all sorts of characters like that. That some of whom we get to know more in the movie than others, but I'll get to that probably. So Skull Island is perpetually shrouded by a storm, and it's only recently with satellite technology that they've been able to photograph the island, and they say, "Oh, this is an uncharted spot on the map. We must go there," says John Goodman's character, whose name I forget. Yeah, that's going to be a recurring theme, because except for Samuel L. Jackson's character, Colonel Packard, I forget the names of pretty much all the characters, which kind of stinks, but you know how movies are nowadays. They don't say the characters' names often enough. By the way, I'm Jynx the Lynx, just so you know. So they decide the best way, they take helicopters, they get on the island, and they're flying over, and they decide, let's drop a bunch of bombs on the island. They say it's for scientific purposes, to map the subsurface, you know, like remember Jurassic Park? Yeah, Jurassic Park. When they had the little radar thingy that scanned the ground, and the image of the Velociraptor skeleton came up on the computer screen, and Alan Grant's like, "I hate computers." You know, it's kind of like that radar subsurface mapping that they do. But actually, it's to draw out the monster, which John Goodman reveals later in the movie. You know, wouldn't you know it, Kong appears very early in the movie, about 25 or 30 minutes in. He just starts throwing trees and smashing helicopters together, and he's over 100 feet tall. He's huge, and you know, he's just smashing the helicopters, and it's a really good action sequence. And it's surprising. It's surprising how many people actually survive crashing helicopters. It's like, you know, only more impressive special effects than that. So he attacks the helicopters, and it's a big battle sequence. And then there's basically two parties. There's a Samuel L. Jackson and John Goodman and some soldiers. Excuse me. and there's the scientists and civilians, and a few soldiers in the other party. So you got two separate parties, and they go, we got to make our way to the north end of the island. That's where the rendezvous point is. So we got to meet up and go that way. But the problem is the island is full of crazy monsters. You know, surprisingly, there's no dinosaurs. There is a Triceratops skull you see, but no Triceratops in the flesh. There's kind of a pterodactyl-looking guy. There's a giant stick bug, a giant octopus, which Kong fights, which is awesome. So the fact that they reference King Kong versus Godzilla, and he actually eats the octopus, and the tentacles are like, he's like, he eats the octopus, and that was really, really funny. There are these skull crawler creatures, and they're basically kind of like imagine a Tyrannosaurus if you took away the front arms, the little arms, and just had these big kind of legs on it. So those are pretty cool character designs, the monster designs for that. And they're basically the T-Rex stand-ins in this movie. And Kong fights a couple of them throughout the picture, including a big one at the end. So one of the teams ends up meeting John C. Reilly, the actor, who's he's the pilot who crash landed at the beginning of the movie from World War II, and he's a little crazy, but because he's been on this island for almost 30 years, and the natives this time around are surprisingly friendly, you know, compared to how they were in the Peter Jackson remake, when they were basically, you know. And there's some funny points in the movie where he's like, so, did we win World War II yet? And they're like, yeah, and he's like, cool. So, wait a minute, you're telling me that the Russians are the bad guys now? They were our allies in World War II, what happened, man? And it's like, oh, it's kind of a Cold War. So what, they don't fight during the summer? That was kind of funny character interaction between them. And John C. Reilly, he steals the show whenever he's in the scene, you know? So you have Samuel L. Jackson's team trying to reach the northern point of the island, and you have the civilian team led by I think his name's Tom Hiddleston. I don't know the actor, but he's the British guy, the British commando, and they're trying to get there too, to the north end of the island. And of course they encounter all sorts of monsters, and there's a giant spider sequence, which is pretty cool. You know, you can't have a Kong movie without giant spiders, except the original one, unfortunately. So, it's the basic Lost World survival type of movie, you know, where you're on the island surrounded by dinosaurs and all these other, you know, giant monsters, and you have to make it to a certain point. So it's a bit like the Lost World Jurassic Park. I keep making references to Jurassic Park. Oh yeah, by the way, early in the movie, when they get on the helicopters and they're ready to take off from the ship, Samuel L. Jackson says, hold on to your butts. I swear to you, he says, hold on to your butts. And I was holding on to my butt during this movie because it is action-packed and exciting. So they eventually make their way towards the north end of the island after encountering a bunch of, you know, dinosaur-type creatures, and, you know, people get killed by pterodactyls, and there's a giant stick bug and the giant octopus, which I mentioned earlier. And they encounter these skull crawlers in a pretty good sequence in a giant mass graveyard of giant Kong bones. And it's, you know, the giant skull crawler running around. So that was a pretty cool sequence. What else? Oh yeah, because some of his men were killed by Kong, Samuel L. Jackson's character, Packard, the colonel, he kind of goes a little crazy and wants to kill Kong. So he's like, we got to make our way to this crashed helicopter to get the bombs and everything, because there's napalm and explosive devices on the helicopter, and we can use it to kill Kong. So he sets up a trap. Kong comes to the trap. He sets off a lake full of napalm, which almost kills Kong, you know. Excuse me, my back is itchy. So Samuel L. Jackson's like, we got to plant explosives, we got to kill this guy, you know. So he becomes a bit like Captain Ahab in Moby Dick. But more on that later. So there's another standoff where the scientists are pointing guns at him, and he's pointing guns at the scientists, and it's like, you can't do this, this is a bad thing. And he's like, Kong killed all these soldiers. Here are their dog tags. I'm going to kill him. He deserves it. And wouldn't you know it, the gigantic skull crawler, the alpha skull crawler, wakes up, and he fights Kong. And it's basically the Kong versus T-Rex fight, only it's not a T-Rex, it's a skull crawler, which is like a T-Rex, but I'm rambling. Surprisingly, during the end of this fight, Kong does not kill the Skullcrawler by the traditional King Kong fatality move, which, was in the original and in the Peter Jackson remake. You know what I'm talking about. Taking the jaws and just ripping them in half. He almost does it, but instead he sticks his hand down the monster's throat and pulls its tongue out and pulls the rest of its guts out with it. And I'm like, oh my god, that's awesome. That is so cool. It's like, they should have made that bloodier, had an R rating. That would have been awesome. But he just rips all of his guts out. So somehow his stomach and intestines were connected to his tongue, which is like a chameleon tongue, which goes, kind of like that. Boy, I'm making a lot of things this video, so I apologize for the less mature aspects. So Kong survives. He destroys the giant Skullcrawler by ripping its guts out. And, it's a tremendous fight. It's really, really cool. He saves the girl from drowning, who, the photographer, the girl, he saves her. And it's like, he's kind of walking off into the sunset, sunrise, whatever. He's walking off into the distance. And it's like, wow, Kong's really a good guy after all. He's the god of this island kind of thing. And once you know it, the U.S. military arrives with a couple more helicopters, and we see a close-up of Kong's eyes as the camera just zooms in to Kong's eyes, and it's like, uh-oh, they're in trouble now. And then it cuts to black. And then somehow, John C. Reilly makes his way home to Chicago and meets up with his estranged wife, who he hasn't seen since World War II, his son, who he's never seen, who was born, during World War II. And it's like, wow, a happy ending in a Kong movie, that's never happened before, as far as I know. And then you have the post-credit sequence where we find out that the main character survived. Huge spoiler, obviously. And they're in one of those places with the one-way mirror where people are on the other side watching them, and it's like, look, I swear I won't tell the Russians. And the girl's like, I swear I will tell the Russians. And the guy's like, can you believe what she's just said? So the other surviving characters, the scientists, they walk in, they're like, hey, welcome to the Monarch Organization. And guess what? This Kong monster, he's not the only one. Check this crap out. And it's like, here's some cave paintings of Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Godzilla. And it's like, oh boy, they're setting up the sequel, the next movie in the Monsterverse. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, Godzilla's roars at the end of the movie just to, hammer the point home. So there you have it. That's my spoiler-filled, rambling, incoherent, rawr-filled summary of King Kong, Kong Skull Island. Sorry, excuse me. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a tremendous amount of action. The fact that you see Kong a lot in this movie, especially at the beginning and the end. Not so much in the middle. That's where, there's other monsters. But at the beginning, about 30 minutes in, when he attacks the helicopters, the big action sequence. And then later at the end, where, excuse me, I had Burger King and popcorn, where Kong, goes into the lake of napalm and he fights out the gigantic Skullcrawler. So, but in the middle, you don't see him too much. He just kind of walks around and looks stoic. He does kill the octopus. And he saves I don't know whether it's a water buffalo or an African buffalo. It's got the horns that kind of go like that. But, Chief Bogle from Zootopia, he saves one of those, basically, from underneath a helicopter that somehow crashed on top of it. So he's a good guy, too. He just, doesn't like being shot at with helicopter machine guns. He gets a bit cranky about that. Character-wise, I liked Samuel L. Jackson's performance and John Goodman's performance and John C. Reilly. They stole the show, those three guys. The other characters they were alright. Some of the soldiers, they didn't have personality as much, and they were just there to be picked off by a giant spider or, the Skullcrawler or pterodactyls or whatever. But they were alright. But the main character is the photographer girl. She's pretty good. The British guy, he's pretty good. The scientist, the African American scientist, he's pretty good. The Asian girl, they didn't give her much to work with character-wise. She doesn't really do much in that movie, unfortunately. But like I said, John C. Reilly, he steals the show whenever he's around, and it's great. You know, the movie has a lot of humor in it too, a lot of funny moments sprinkled through it. And there's even a point at the end, the post-credit sequence, where it's black, and we hear the British guy's voice. He's like, "You're standing there, you're just sitting there, aren't you, in the dark? Why didn't you come out and look at us?" You know, and it's like he's talking to the audience sitting there in the dark in the theater, which was kind of funny. I didn't do it justice, but believe me, it was pretty funny. Really cool creature special effects and monster fights. And excuse me, my back is itchy again. I'm really unprofessional in this video. I apologize. Hey, look at that. So I like this a lot more than 2014's Godzilla. That one, a lot of people didn't like the fact that Godzilla didn't show up until late in the movie, which, if you know Godzilla films, that's actually standard operating procedure. Excuse me, I can't talk. Where Godzilla doesn't show up until later in the movie, and he doesn't show up much at all. So, I like 2014's Godzilla. I haven't seen it in a little while, but because I've been watching, King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong recently, I like this movie, I think, a little bit more than Peter Jackson's King Kong. That one was a bit too long. A few moments I didn't like here and there, but this movie, it's a jam-packed 2 hours of fun, action, adventure, and adrenaline. It's a really fun movie, so it's a really fun ride. Creature effects are great. You know, Kong is fantastic and has a lot of great moments, here and there in the movie. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's better than 2014's Godzilla, and I wonder how. I can't wait to see what the next Godzilla movie, which is going to feature Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, is going to be like. And then 2020, Kong versus Godzilla, or the rematch. Oh, yeah. It's been about 60 years since they last fought in King Kong versus Godzilla, back in '63. So it's about time that the two greatest monsters of all time, East meets West. I gotta stop doing that. I'm sorry. I'm so immature and childish in this video. So I can't wait for that, but it's going to be 3 years, and it's going to be 3 long years before then. So, in the meantime, we have Godzilla 2, which unfortunately is called Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I hate when a movie remake uses the same title. So it's like, hey, I'm watching Godzilla King of the Monsters. Oh, you mean the 1956 Americanized version of the original 1954 film starring Raymond Burr? Or do you mean the new 2020, the new film with the American Godzilla, the sequel to 2014's Godzilla? So they could have just called it Godzilla 2 or Godzilla Strikes Back or Godzilla Triple Trouble or whatever, but no, they had to call it Godzilla King of the Monsters. So, okay, I'm rambling now. I apologize. I've apologized a lot in this video. So, yeah, a lot of the movie was shot in Vietnam, and the fact that it takes place during the Vietnam War era, it's pretty interesting, and I'm just wondering, how international relations have changed since then. So, the fact that it's shot in Vietnam, and there's some gorgeous scenery, by the way, of Southeast Asia, that's kind of neat. So, I'm going to wrap this up, I think. Some pretty good characters, some that aren't as good because you don't get to know them as much, but the characters we do get to know, John C. Reilly, John Goodman, and Samuel L. Jackson, they're really good, and the movie's worth watching for them. And you're wondering, okay, how's this guy going to die? Or how's that guy going to die? Or, oh no, there's a giant spider. I wonder who he's going to kill next. And, of course, the final confrontation, I apologize for that, between Kong and this giant skull crawler, that was really cool, too. So, yeah, I could ramble on and on about Kong and how this compares to the original 1933 version or the 76 version or the Peter Jackson version. Real quick, not as good as the original, obviously. What is? That's, like, possibly the greatest movie of all time. A lot better than the 76 remake, but come on, that one doesn't really count. The Peter Jackson version, that's a really good movie in and of itself, but a couple parts here and there I don't like. But that's a better made picture, I think. More artsy, high class. This is more just monster fight. So this one is more fun, but Kong 05 is a better made movie. So like I said, I could probably ramble on, and I don't want to take up too much time because I have to edit this video. And again, like I was rambling on about, I really enjoyed it. Go watch it if you like Kong, if you like giant monster movies. Now, excuse me, I gotta blow my nose.